No matter how many friends you already have, there's one more you may not expect, your dark side. Everyone has one, but most people don't even know it's there. This idea was one of Carl Jung's most powerful discoveries during his life as a psychologist. Jung, along with Sigmund Freud and Alfred Adler, helped create what we now call modern psychology. After a while, Jung chose to go in a different direction than Freud and followed his own path. He built his own system of thought called analytic psychology. Jung wrote many important books, including Psychology of the Unconscious, Man and His Symbols, The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, and Memories, Dreams, Reflections. His work often focused on something he called the self and the psyche. The psyche is like your mind or soul. It includes both the parts you know and the parts you don't. The self is the full picture of who you are and who you have the potential to become. The conscious mind includes everything you're aware of, while the unconscious mind holds everything you aren't aware of. Jung became especially well known for his ideas about a process called individuation. This is a journey where you learn more about yourself by bringing hidden parts of your mind, the unconscious, into the open. One of the most important parts of this process is getting to know what Jung called the shadow, your dark side. Your shadow is made up of the traits and habits you don't like to admit you have. It might include things like anger, jealousy, pride, selfishness, laziness, or showing off. These are the parts of yourself you try to hide, not just from others, but even from yourself. Often, people don't even realize these parts are there, but keeping them buried inside can make you feel unhappy, fake, and even empty. At first, the shadow might seem like a part of you that you should avoid. It can seem like an enemy, but actually, that's not true. The shadow can become your helper, maybe even a secret friend. Learning to understand it instead of running from it can help you become more honest, more confident, and more whole. Carl Jung once said, "No strong and healthy tree ever turns away from its dark roots, because it grows both up into the sky and down into the ground." One of the most important things to know about your shadow is this: you can't see it easily. That's why it's called a shadow. Everything you already know about yourself is like standing in the light, but the parts you don't know yet stay hidden behind you, in the dark. To become friends with your shadow, you have to try and see it clearly. That means learning more about the parts of yourself that you don't usually think about. This takes honesty and courage. Not knowing what's in your shadow can actually be harmful. You might think hiding your bad traits means they'll go away, but that's not how it works. The parts of yourself you try to push down don't disappear. They often show up later in ways you don't expect and can't control. For example, if you always hold back your anger, it might suddenly explode one day when something small bothers you. The same can happen with other traits too, like jealousy or fear. If you keep ignoring your flaws, they may end up leading your actions instead of you making clear choices. It's very normal to want to look away from the parts of ourselves we dislike. It's hard to admit things like jealousy or fear, especially when we want to see ourselves as kind, brave, or confident. But just because we don't talk about something doesn't mean it's not there. Take someone who sees themselves as very confident. They might say, "I'm never nervous," even though deep down, they do have insecurities. They may avoid situations that make them feel unsure. They might choose not to wear certain clothes or speak up in certain places, not because they don't want to, but because they don't want those hidden feelings to come up. People who ignore parts of themselves often end up building a little world where they don't have to face what's hard. But pretending to be confident means always running from the truth. Real confidence doesn't come from hiding fears. It comes from noticing them and working through them. That first step is seeing your shadow for what it really is, a part of you that's just waiting to be understood. How can you fix what you don't see? It's hard to work on something if you don't even know it's there. That's why the first step in becoming a better version of yourself is learning what your weaknesses are. But how do you do that? You start by asking yourself questions. Think of it like having a quiet talk with yourself. This might feel strange at first, but it's a helpful way to understand your thoughts and feelings. Learning about the parts of yourself you usually ignore takes time and care. You need to stay focused and try not to get distracted. Each day, take a few quiet minutes to ask yourself, what things did I do today? Why did I act the way I did? What made me want to do those things? What was I scared of today? Dr. Carl Jung, a very important psychologist, believed that the best way to explore these questions is by doing peaceful activities like meditating, writing in a journal, or drawing. Drawing can be especially helpful. Jung suggested that people try drawing mandalas, shapes with patterns that go in circles. These simple, balanced designs help calm your mind and let your thoughts come forward. They can help you notice feelings and ideas you usually push away. The way you draw might say something about how you're feeling inside. Do your drawings have soft, smooth curves, or are they filled with sharp, straight lines? Do you use bright, warm colors like red and yellow, or cooler shades like blue and green? What might these choices mean? By drawing mandalas often, maybe every day, or even once a week, you can start to see how you change and grow over time. Looking back on your pictures can show you patterns in your thoughts and feelings that you might not notice otherwise. One of the most revealing ways to get to know your shadow is to look closely at how you see other people. Often, the things we criticize in others are actually traits we don't want to admit exist within ourselves. This is called projection. When we bury our flaws deep down and try to pretend they aren't there, those same flaws often show up in how we judge the people around us. Take laziness, for example. If you've convinced yourself that you're always productive and hardworking, you might begin to see anyone resting or taking a break as lazy. But the truth is, you might just be rejecting your own need for rest or your occasional desire to do nothing. Because you won't accept that part of yourself, you see it everywhere else and react negatively to it. Projection is a clever trick the mind plays to keep our self-image clean, but in the process, it stops us from growing. That's why shadow work, exploring the hidden, rejected parts of yourself, is so important. A helpful place to start is by looking at your day and asking some simple questions. Who did I judge today? What did I judge them for? Which qualities in others make me angry, uncomfortable, or upset? And do I carry any of those qualities myself? These questions might not always be easy to answer. In fact, they might make you squirm. But sitting with that discomfort is part of the work. You can do this reflection in the evening, when the day is still fresh in your mind, or in the morning, when your thoughts are clear and focused. Write it down in a journal, or simply think it through during a walk or moment of quiet. The goal is not to beat yourself up, but to get honest. You're not perfect. No one is. But the more clearly you see your whole self, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable, the more power you have to live freely and authentically. The shadow is not something you can explore once and be done with. As you grow and evolve, new pieces of the shadow will emerge. What bothered you last year might not faze you today, and what you're hiding now might not be the same as what you hide tomorrow. It's a lifelong process, and it can be challenging because when you finally uncover those buried parts of yourself, you might feel disgusted or ashamed. You might think, I don't want to be this kind of person. But that's exactly why the shadow work matters. Growth doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from accepting who you truly are and working with it. When you befriend your shadow, it no longer controls you from the background. You stop being reactive and start becoming intentional. You recognize when projection is happening, and you can choose compassion over judgment. You understand your own complexity, and that makes it easier to understand others too. In the end, getting to know your shadow helps you live more honestly. It teaches you to accept yourself, not just the parts you show the world, but the parts you hide away. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim your full humanity. Carl Jung once said, "You don't become wise just by thinking about goodness and light. You grow by noticing and understanding your own darkness." This means that instead of ignoring the parts of yourself that seem bad or scary, you should try to learn from them. Think of your shadow, the hidden part of you, as a strange but helpful friend. You might not like everything about this friend, but they can still give you advice now and then. Even though you may wish it weren't true, your shadow is a part of who you are, and every part of you can be useful in the right moment. For example, your shadow might be made up of things like greed, anger, being stubborn, or laziness. These don't sound like great traits, but let's look a little closer. Let's say greed is part of your shadow. Maybe you've always tried so hard not to be greedy that you've ended up giving too much, saying no to nice things, or believing you don't deserve better. Being greedy all the time is a problem, but so is being too generous when it hurts you. Sometimes the greedy part of you might simply be trying to say, "Don't settle, ask for what you need." If you want more money at work, you often need to speak up and ask. If you want help, you have to reach out. If you want something nice for yourself once in a while, that's okay too. Instead of ignoring the greedy feeling, try to hear it as a voice saying, "You are worth more." You don't always have to agree, but listening won't hurt. Now think about anger. It's true that someone who's always angry can be hard to be around. Many people who want to seem kind or gentle try to hide their anger deep inside. But when you lock it away and never deal with it, it doesn't go away. It builds up and sometimes bursts out in ways you can't control. Still, anger isn't always bad. It can show up when something feels unfair or wrong. If you feel angry, ask yourself, why? Maybe your anger is trying to protect you or stand up for you. Maybe it's saying, "This isn't okay." Just like with greed, you don't have to follow your anger, but it's worth listening to. Instead of pretending your shadow doesn't exist, try talking to it like a friend. Ask what it's trying to tell you. You don't have to do everything it says, but if you listen, you might learn something important about yourself. Sometimes, the traits we dislike most in ourselves or in others hold secret lessons. A childish friend, for example, might seem immature or silly at first, but spend enough time with them and you'll notice something else. They see the world with wonder. They laugh easily, get excited about small things, and aren't afraid to look foolish. That joy, that lightness, is something many of us have lost in the seriousness of adult life. And maybe, just maybe, being a little childish sometimes isn't so bad. Or take the lazy friend. Maybe they sleep in late, take long naps, or always find a way to do less. But then you notice they're not always tired, stressed, or burned out like you. They know how to relax. They understand rest is not a reward, but a necessity. Maybe you don't need to become like them entirely, but maybe you need to learn from them. The truth is, every trait, even the ones we judge, has two sides. And when we look closely, we can often find a hidden strength. By reflecting on these so-called flaws, you can start to see their value. What first seems like a weakness might actually be wisdom in disguise. That doesn't mean you should let laziness, impulsiveness, or childishness rule your life. But it does mean you should stop pretending those parts don't exist. Instead, learn to balance them. When you integrate your shadow, the rejected parts of you, you gain more control, not less. You start to use those traits when they help and set them aside when they don't. To do that, you need to be honest with yourself. It's not easy. Looking at the parts of you that you've been ashamed of or tried to ignore can feel uncomfortable, even painful. But within that discomfort is power. If you're brave enough to listen, your shadow will offer you advice. Sometimes that advice will lead you astray, but other times, it will surprise you. It will offer insights no polished version of you ever could. You must learn to treat your shadow like a strange but wise friend. They may have bad habits, but they also know truths that the rest of you has forgotten. When you accept your whole self, including your messiest parts, you open the door to a deeper kind of wisdom, a wisdom that is grounded in reality, shaped by experience, and truly your own. Carl Jung once said, "Becoming aware of your shadow is the most important step toward truly knowing yourself." Learning about your shadow means learning about a part of yourself you might not have seen before. And when you do that, you can start to be the real you, your true, one-of-a-kind self. When you hide your shadow, you have to do a lot of pretending. You might act like you're never tired, never afraid, or never unsure of yourself. People who work the hardest to hide their shadow often stop being real. Instead of showing who they really are, they try to become who they think others want them to be. They even start believing that their true self isn't real or doesn't matter. Many of the traits hiding in the shadow are actually what make each person special. But because being different can feel scary, we sometimes try to hide those parts of ourselves. We try to be like everyone else. The problem is, when you push away what makes you unique, you lose a part of who you are. That's why it's so helpful to get to know your shadow and treat it like a friend that's giving you ideas and advice. When you listen to what it's saying, you might come up with smart, creative answers to problems that you never would have thought of before. These ideas are special because they come from you, from your full self. Understanding your shadow also helps you feel good about who you are. For example, maybe you notice that you've had greedy thoughts, but instead of being ashamed, you realize something positive. You're good at speaking up for yourself and asking for what you need. That's a strength. Everything you learn from your shadow, every new thing you discover about how you think, feel, and act, comes together to help you grow into the best version of yourself. When you make your shadow conscious, when you stop running from the parts of yourself you've ignored or pushed away, you open the door to discovering who you really are. Suddenly, dreams and desires that were buried deep inside begin to surface. You might realize you've always wanted to write a book, start a garden, move to a quiet town, or open a cafe. These dreams didn't disappear. They were simply hidden, waiting for you to look inward and listen. Your shadow holds pieces of your truth. It carries not just your fears and flaws, but also your hidden strengths, forgotten wishes, and the bold ideas you were once too afraid to pursue. When you begin to live in tune with your shadow, you're not following someone else's rules or expectations. You're carving out your own path, one that feels right for you, even if it looks strange to others. Living authentically doesn't have a script. It's not about doing what's popular or accepted. It's about discovering your unique rhythm, your personal voice, and that voice becomes clearer when you invite your shadow to speak. Ask it questions. What do you really want in life? What have you been afraid to admit? What version of yourself have you been hiding? The answers may surprise you, but they will also guide you. Your shadow won't give you a perfect plan, but it will reveal what matters most to you. And when you begin making choices that align with that truth, you'll feel it. Life won't necessarily become easier, but it will feel more real, more yours. To befriend your shadow is to begin the most honest relationship you'll ever have with yourself. When you stop hiding from who you are, you can finally grow into who you're meant to be. That's the power of living with authenticity. That's the power of embracing your shadow. In one of Carl Jung's final quotes we'll share, he says, "Be careful with wisdom you haven't earned." Like with any friend, you won't always agree with your shadow. In fact, if you ignore it completely, it can end up hurting you. We've talked about this before, but it's worth repeating. Getting to know your shadow isn't something you do just once. It's something you keep working on. Understanding your shadow takes time and care. It's a little like taking care of a friendship. If you stop putting in the effort, things can go wrong. You might start to fight with your shadow in ways you don't expect. So, what does that look like? If your shadow doesn't feel heard or understood, it might show up as confusing feelings, angry outbursts, being too hard on others, or feeling unsure of yourself. Even after you've learned to accept your shadow and listen to it, it can still lead you in the wrong direction sometimes. Your shadow may give you advice that doesn't help. It might stir up feelings that seem true in the moment, but aren't really. It might tell you to get mad when staying calm would be better, or it could tell you to take it easy when you really need to focus. It might even push you to act different from others at the wrong time. That's why it's important not to follow your shadow without thinking. Don't just go along with what it says. Instead, talk to it. Ask questions. Try to figure out whether it's helping or not. You can still be friends, but good friends don't always agree, and that's okay. Befriending your shadow is not a one-time task. It's an ongoing relationship that demands patience, compassion, and a willingness to listen. You need to be patient with yourself as you explore the deeper parts of who you are. Some days, your shadow may whisper things that surprise or unsettle you. Other days, it may stay quiet, waiting for you to ask the right questions. In both moments, give yourself time. Rushing through self-reflection only invites confusion and misjudgment. Your shadow doesn't want to destroy you, it wants to be heard. The danger lies in ignoring it or reacting too quickly to what it says. When you feel a sudden urge, a strong emotion, or a strange intuition, don't shut it down. Instead, pause. Ask yourself, what is this feeling really about? What is my shadow trying to tell me here? You don't have to blindly obey your instincts, but you also shouldn't reject them completely. Use your rational mind like a wise advisor, someone who helps you make sense of the message without dismissing it. Reflect on what you're feeling. Is your shadow guiding you towards something valuable, or is it reacting to an old fear or wound? Break it down logically. What are the risks? What are the benefits? What would happen if you followed this instinct? Journaling, sketching, meditating, or even talking out loud to yourself can help you sort through these complex moments. The goal isn't to win a battle against your shadow, but to work with it. Sometimes that means challenging it, questioning its motives, holding it accountable, and making sure your decisions are grounded in understanding, not just impulse. A healthy relationship with your shadow is built on honest dialogue. Don't just accept everything it says, but don't ignore it either. Treat it like a clever, mischievous friend who occasionally gives strange advice. You don't have to agree with every word, but if you never listen, you'll miss the hidden wisdom that could change your life.